Hello, and welcome back to Kev Likes Movies. I'm Kev, and I like movies. Sometimes, just not this one. Girl on the Third Floor is a piece of shit. This movie came out just this past October, and if you haven't heard of it, I don't blame you. I might not have heard of it either until my sister asked me to watch it with her. Thanks, sis. I'll add that to the list of things I'll never forgive you for. She didn't tell me anything about the movie, she only described it using the words dumb, cringy, and weird. Now, I don't know about you, but those aren't necessarily bad words to me. So with little context, I performed a cursory Google search, careful not to spoil anything for myself, and that's when I found out that this movie has a relatively high critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But then I noticed the audience score. Usually when that happens, it means that a film is experimental in some way, and challenges the expectation of film in a way that might not be accessible to all casual viewers. I'd seen discrepancies like these before, but very few were this drastic. So my curiosity was piqued, and I decided to watch the movie, knowing that I tend to side with critics on these sorts of films. I just had to know what had critics and audiences so divided, and having seen it twice now, the question that remains is, what the living fuck do critics see in this movie? Now, before I continue, I have to make one thing perfectly clear. Rotten Tomatoes is garbage. Everyone understands this. They are not the be-all, end-all resource for whether or not a film is any good. The percentages found there aren't based on user ratings on any kind of scale from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or whatnot. They only account for the percentage of people who liked or recommended the film. For example, let's say 10 critics rate a film. On any usual aggregator website, that means that that film would get a 60%, but on Rotten Tomatoes, that film would get 100% because every critic who watched it technically liked it. This is a very flawed system, and nothing takes advantage of that system more than Girl on the Third Floor. This movie is just wrong. And I don't mean that from an ethical or moral standpoint. I mean wrong as in incorrect. And that'll be the theme of this review. Incorrect.
But Kev,
You might be saying.
film is an adaptable medium that promotes innovation and self-expression. There's no right way to make a movie.
And you're right. There is no one singular right way to make a movie. There are, however, about 15 billion wrong ways to make a movie. And this film touches on a whole bunch of them. Girl on the Third Floor is about a man named Don, a former lawyer who goes about renovating a dilapidated old house for himself and his pregnant wife. And no, your eyes don't deceive you. That is CM Punk. We'll get to him later. So yeah, we got a haunted house movie on our hands, folks. Surprise. What, did you think this film was a romantic comedy? Please. This is the first and to date only feature film from director Travis Stevens, and to be honest, it's a pretty solid move for a first-time director to make a haunted house movie. The whole film is shot almost entirely in one location using a handful of actors, and it's much cheaper and easier to get the funds together to produce a story in that kind of setting. The problem with that, however, is that it's such an easy movie to make that it's the go-to setting for first-time filmmakers, and you have to have a genuine talent and some really creative ideas to make something that overdone into something fresh and exciting. Travis Stevens is not a genuine talent, at least not yet. And he has no creative ideas. Nothing about this is fresh or exciting, it's disgusting and dull, except for moments when it's hilarious and absurd. I've seen people compare this movie to The Shining in that the house itself is something of a character in the film, and while that's certainly true of The Shining, I don't think it applies here. This is not the Overlook Hotel. And Travis Stevens is not Stanley Kubrick. The Overlook was insidious and conniving, and it was open to interpretation just how much of what went on there was the result of Jack Torrance's madness, or if it was the influence of the Overlook itself. I think Stevens had the idea to make the house in this film a character in its own right, but he just couldn't figure out how to do that. So instead, he just made the house secrete bodily fluids. That happens a lot in this film. Anyway, back to Don. Don is an idiot. He's also a tremendous asshole, but he's mostly an idiot. His complete and utter idiocy is the driving force of this movie, and is indeed the only thing making it even remotely watchable. He replaces drywall barefoot, he touches weird substances oozing from the walls and doesn't think to inquire about what they are. He finds this weird shit oozing from an electrical socket, touches it, and plugs his drill into the electrical socket anyway. Now, Don, I realize that you're not the smartest guy around, but there's consequences to that type of shit. Be careful. His neighbor comes by to welcome him to the neighborhood with bourbon, and he has the audacity to ask,
What about you? Do you live around here?
does she live around here? No, dipshit. She drove all the way from Milwaukee to knock on a stranger's door and offer them booze. By the way, it's later revealed that he's a recovering alcoholic, and he just accepts the bourbon without saying anything. I guess he just doesn't want to be rude. Except when he's on a video call with his wife and just hangs up on her unceremoniously. I mentioned earlier that Don is a tremendous asshole, in addition to being a colossal idiot. So let's get into that. Remember when I said he was a recovering alcoholic? Well, now that his wife isn't around, he drinks constantly. Remember when I said his wife was pregnant? Well, she's staying somewhere else while he works on the house. Too dangerous for her. And now that the wife is gone, there's nothing to stop him from cheating on his wife with the neighbor girl that he met while she was just standing on his back porch. not really doing anything, just kind of standing there. Oh, and he also tries to justify his adultery later on to his dog.
Don't look at me like that. I earned that.
How he earned that exactly, the world may never know. But here's the thing. Main characters don't have to be good people to be compelling. And considering what some critics are saying about this movie, it's possible that Don's shortcomings as a person may have been intentional. Maybe it's less of a horror film with a conventional plot and more of a character study. Maybe we're supposed to see this man for who he really is, as opposed to who he portrays himself to be. Like he's Patrick fucking Bateman or some shit. Yeah, I'm afraid I have to call bullshit on that one. Look, the thing about flawed characters, or any characters really, is that they need to have a compelling motivation. And Don's motivation actually has some potential to be compelling if handled the right way. He's trying to repair his marriage and build a home for his family despite being kind of a fuck up in his past. Okay, that actually sounds like it could be interesting. Bad guy trying to go straight narratives tend to be very compelling. But Don's motivation is entirely incongruent with his actions. It would be different if, say, he was desperately trying to go straight and then fell off the wagon and made a drunken mistake. Then we'd actually feel sorry for him because not only did he fail his wife, but also himself. We'd have internal conflict as well as external conflict. But here, Don makes very little to no effort to clean up his act, and he feels entirely justified in doing what he does. He doesn't care about doing better because he doesn't feel like he has to, which would be fine if he was the antagonist, but he's not. He's the main character, and a lot of this film focuses on Don being alone while he's fixing up this gross shithole. So now we, as the audience, are trapped alone in a house with a main character that we're not even sure we're supposed to give a fuck about, which makes a great deal of the film incredibly fucking boring until we get the external conflict of him just trying to get Sarah, the neighbor girl, to fuck off. But I'm going on way too long about something that actually amounts to very little in the actual story. Don sleeps with the neighbor girl Sarah, and that acts as sort of the inciting incident, which is just fucking terrific news because that means more characters get introduced, which means that we get to have dialogue scenes. And boy oh boy do I fucking hate the dialogue in this movie. There's a scene early on where Don visits an empty bowling alley to have a drink. The fewer questions you ask, the better. And he has this incredibly awkward exchange with the guy who runs the place.
Are you visiting or lost?
Resident. I just bought the house on Saul and Circle. What?
You queer?
Because that's relevant. He explains that the house just seems to be bad news for straight men. I have several questions about this, and here they are. How do you know that? Why'd you ask as if there's something wrong with that and then say there's nothing wrong with that? Pick a side. Does that mean that gay men can live there and be totally fine? Why? Don says,
I'm happily married.
and the bowling alley guy takes that as affirmation that Don's not gay. But this line
Yeah, I'm about to have a kid. What kind of a question is that?
didn't mean anything? Is that meant to imply that gay people can't be happily married? Incorrect. Why doesn't Don think this is weird? Why doesn't Don ask any follow-up questions? Why does Don have a Hitler haircut? The scene is ultimately meaningless in the general context of the film, but I bring it up for one simple reason. It's the first scene in which I noticed that every dialogue scene in this movie is structured like this. We get an uncomfortable, static close-up shot of one of the actors delivering their lines almost straight into the camera, and then a reverse shot of the other actor delivering their lines almost straight into the camera, and then it just cuts back and forth, back and forth. It's like this with every single scene between every single character. Let me be clear. Typically speaking, you do not shoot dialogue this way. I cannot even begin to fathom why anyone thought this was a good idea. Why 29 different critics looked at this dog shit movie with dialogue scenes shot like this and said,
That was a good movie.
it's so jarring and uncomfortable, and it only serves to distract the audience from what's actually being said. Not once during this entire film did I ever feel like characters were actually speaking to one another. The only time I've ever seen this technique used effectively was in Silence of the Lambs. There, it was only used in scenes between Clarice and Hannibal Lecter. Not for every fucking exchange in the film. And you want to know why it actually worked there? Because it's uncomfortable. It's intimate. It works to draw the audience in so we can actually focus on what they're saying to each other. Those scenes took place in mental hospitals and prisons with loud prisoners and patients. But then we get to the end of the hallway, and Clarice takes a seat. And now we're drawn into their conversation as this intimidating setting all melts away. And all we're left with is a psychopath with a talent for manipulation and a young FBI agent with a case to solve and something to prove. We get to watch as they engage in a battle of wits, trying to manipulate each other into getting them what they want. It's almost like watching them play chess in their minds. Here? Nah, just folks talking. It would be different if it was actually good dialogue, but sadly we don't even get that. Back, forth, back, Fourth, maybe a wide shot from a nearby hallway for no reason, and then back to one of the actors fogging up the lens with their fucking breath. And as if this wasn't bad enough, what makes this even more egregious is the fact that no one in this movie can fucking act. Least of all, Philip Jack Brooks, better known as professional wrestler turned MMA fighter turned actor, I guess, CM Punk. The very same. He's garbage in this. And to be fair, it's not entirely his fault. He's just horrifically miscast. Don't get me wrong. He has some moments in this movie, and I have no doubt that he has the ability to turn in a good performance, but he is not a leading man. He'd probably be more at home playing a stoic badass of some kind. Hell, put him in a John Wick movie and he'd fit right in. Keanu can't fucking act either, and those movies are great. Most of the cast is passable, I guess, but I have to imagine that they could have put in a better performance if the camera wasn't directly in their faces at all times. It would also help if the plot wasn't complete dog shit. So Don fucks the neighbor girl, defends the shit to his dog, but oh no, she goes all Fatal Attraction on us. We get another tepid scene with the booze lady.
Let's start with the house. How's she coming along?
Fine.
It is most certainly not fine, my dude. This movie has a weird fixation with cum, by the way. Don has a dog, and since this movie was written by a fucking hack, the dog doesn't make it.
Sarah.
Sarah, yeah.
No last name.
Well, I imagine she has one, but I didn't check her ID, okay? Look.
And?
And? You see the dog, right? You think he jumped into the goddamn dryer by himself?
It's just a video of a dog running down the stairs. Dogs do that, you moron. That video proves nothing. Also, you have security camera footage, and that's the only thing that you decided to show the police officer? You'd think that if Sarah did it, then you would have her on camera. Unless she's a ghost. Ooh, foreshadowing. He has another scene with Sarah where he tries to kill her, but oh no, her body is gone. Then there's a scene that takes place at night where Don is finally figuring out what's going on. Then it immediately cuts to the next day, and Don's continuing his investigation when Sarah sends him this glorious MySpace selfie, and then he gets fucking marbled to death by a spooky ghost bitch. I suppose the transition from nighttime to daytime is to imply how long he's been at this, but the problem with doing that is that you're forced to shine a light on effects and makeup best kept in the dark. Some of the effects in this movie actually aren't bad, and I'll admit that it's a bit unnerving to see all those marbles crawling through Don's skin, but that's about it as far as genuine scares go. And even then, it's not really that scary or unique, just kind of feels thrown in. So Don dies about an hour in, and we still have about a half an hour to go. So in walks Don's wife Liz, who is apparently still pregnant. Look, I know I haven't really touched on the whole pregnancy angle yet, so let me just do it here. This makes no sense. There's no real reason that she couldn't be in the house, save for Don just wanting to be away from her because he's a colossal asshole. But even still, what makes Don think he's going to be able to single-handedly get the house ready by the time the baby comes? Don't you think you should be with your wife while she's, you know, carrying your fucking child? Liz runs into Sarah. Sarah's creepy. Liz has the most believable reaction in the entire movie. And then we get yet another meaningless scene with the booze lady, before we get an actually important scene with the booze lady.
He defrauded his clients out of their retirement funds. He barely avoided 15 years in federal prison. He cheated on me while I was trying to get pregnant. And then he insists that buying this house was our second chance. So, yeah.
So why'd you stay?
Good fucking question, booze lady. Why didn't we get any indication of this earlier in the movie? Even better question. Could have made for some good conflict if she was like, hey, why the fuck are you focusing on this house so much? Could have given some better context for all those times he just hung up on her unceremoniously. But nope, none of that. The story reads like a first draft that was never edited or even given to somebody else for feedback. I bet if I got my hands on a copy of the script, that motherfucker would be covered in spelling errors and Cheeto dust. Liz goes back to the house that's now completely alive and filled with people, and we finally get the cliche scene where the entire plot is spoon-fed to the main character, and therefore the audience.
The male performers wore costumes because the owner felt the mix of erotic and grotesque heightened the experience. He was right. We were popular and the money flowed in. Some nights we'd work until dawn. It was too busy to keep an eye on everyone. Even the innocent ones. Even the not so innocent. When he killed me, my body never left the house. I was a star, loved by the men who came through our doors. But not one of them questioned my disappearance.
So yeah, Sarah's been a ghost this whole time. Called it. Apparently ghosts can have sex and take selfies and shit. Didn't know that. So, to clarify, Once upon a time, this house used to be a brothel, and the owner killed not only Sarah, but he was also responsible for this abomination. And the reason that Sarah has been haunting the house is because her body was hidden in the walls and never found. This is fucking dumb. What do you mean her body was never found? It's a house on a street, not a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Nobody even did anything with the body. I guess I could buy it if someone went all Albert Fish on her and hacked her to pieces or something. Maybe buried her in cement in the basement. But someone just stuck her in a wall. You mean to tell me that no one could smell her as she was decomposing? This house had other owners. No one tried to renovate this place before Don's dumbass got here? I get that the implication is that she was a sex worker and no one ever looks for them when they go missing, especially back then. But it's been fucking decades. Nobody found her by now? But whatever. If that's really the backstory, then I can accept all that. Fine, whatever. My biggest problem is that narratively, this means nothing. Why are you giving all this exposition to someone who just entered the story not 20 minutes ago? Up until now, our main character has been Don, and he got killed off. So why are we giving Liz the dramatic payoff? She had nothing to do with the story so far. Sure, the scene where she bashes in the head of that spooky ghost bitch is cool, but it isn't cathartic. It doesn't give us any kind of payoff. And also, I don't know if you realize this, but that's a ghost. You mean to tell me that you can just kill a ghost now? If someone had just given the Ghostbusters baseball bats, would that make the film more or less interesting?
Why the fuck didn't you warn us?
Life is a series of choices, Liz.
Hey, not a fucking answer, booze lady.
A test.
Exactly.
Well, it seems like a pretty shitty game.
And a shitty movie. So anyway, Liz does the fucking impossible, I guess, and finds Sarah's body in some random fucking wall of the house. She takes the body to the booze lady, who's a pastor, by the way. I didn't bring it up because it's not important. And together they give her a proper funeral. Then, 6 months later, Liz is still living in the fucking house, now with her newborn daughter. She puts the baby down for a nap, and we get this.
That's my girl.
Fuck this fucking movie. Oh my god, I hate it so goddamn much. So yeah, Don is a ghost now, and he drops marbles on his infant daughter from the fucking ceiling without any regard to her safety. Could you imagine, as an adult, sleeping soundly and a fucking marble hits you in the head from like 6 feet up? That shit would hurt. And even if you didn't hit her, what do you expect her to do with those? Play with them? Babies don't know how to play with marbles. She's probably just gonna put them in her mouth and fucking choke on them. Well, it's good to know that even after all of this, we can all take solace in knowing that even in the afterlife, Don is a fucking idiot. This is a terrible movie. Hilariously bad even. But there's a more relevant question here. Is it so bad that it's good? Fuck no. It fails even on that front. With most so bad it's good movies, they at least have something going for them that makes them memorable. This movie has scenes that are unintentionally funny, but they're so few and far between, and the stuff between them just consists of annoying dialogue exchanges and useless scenes of a guy renovating his house and finding a bunch of weird gunk that he doesn't seem to question or even mind that much. This isn't The Room, or The Fanatic, or even Devil Dog. Those movies are unforgettable. This is just garbage. But there's still that question of why it has such a high rating. Well, after looking through some reviews, I saw a lot of people praising the atmosphere and the effects, while admitting that the film heavily relies on previously established tropes. Some critics called the atmosphere creepy, and some of them called it campy, which to me kind of lends further credence to that 6 out of 10 argument I brought up earlier. But there were other reviews that were praising the message, and claiming that it was a fun take on gender dynamics. Hey, I'm sorry, but did we watch the same fucking movie? Because the movie I saw was just a bunch of half-assed, lazily written characters with one vague line about men and power, which honestly just sounded like they were trying to make the villain more sympathetic and tragic, which is a huge trope in these kinds of movies. But let's say that the message was there, and it made a very strong point about gender dynamics and even toxic masculinity. That doesn't excuse the filmmaking. It doesn't excuse the cinematography, the writing, the editing, the poorly utilized soundtrack, the awful character motivations, or that vagina in the wall that does the fucking ping pong ball trick with the marbles. Hey! Thanks for watching this cursed ass video. If it seemed like I was particularly harsh in this review, it might have something to do with the fact that I had to record this 3 separate times, and I'm so sick of thinking about this dumb movie. If you watched this far into the video, please like the video, subscribe, share it with your friends, please warn them, to not watch this fucking cum stain of a movie. And if you've seen this movie, tell me what you thought of it. I'd love to know if you were as grossed out and bored as I was. Please leave recommendations for future reviews in the comments, and have yourself a lovely day. I'm gonna go wash out my eyeballs with more Silence of the Lambs. Peace.